The links to join the channel here over at SubScribestar or the various other links. Thanks to everyone over at Throne and who has used my mailbox to send me a lot of awesome comics, which I'm going to be talking about in a few days. So including Batman versus the Vampire, which I got a year ago, and I keep coming back to thinking about talking about that. So the Indiegogo censorship of Cecil is a hate crime. It's probably the greatest evil of the 20th century. He had the original cash grab story, and it was just freaking awesome. So what happened? Well, it depends like where you want to start with Comicsgate. Briefly, it goes back to our hero Richard Myers sitting in his Kia on a dirt road in a cornfield where he held comics when he wasn't getting chased out of parking lots for making, which, somebody sees this guy with a thing on his lap and a cell phone, they probably think he's out of his mind, where he held comics on his lap, no hijab and copyright gods, and he held his Samsung S5 and he talked about comics. And he was talking about modern comics, and they're not very good, and he was honest about that, which is what you should be when you're talking about $4 to $8 comics, which none of them were worth it. I mean, he's nicer on comics than I am. He got a lot of people to go back and look at comics, and they're worse than. I mean, he's like, it turns out that he's like just way too much of a nice guy for these people. But that turned out to be a bridge too far for the mentally ill comic commie fans who they just couldn't accept criticism of their religion. And that's what all this kind of left-wing stuff is. I'm sure it activates the same areas of the brain as a religion does. But their reaction was what helped Comicsgate spring into life. And what an amazing journey it's been for so many people. Because mainstream and it's like it's only possible because SJWs are such douchebags. Because mainstream comics were so bad that Myers decided to just write his own, and people decided that was a good idea, and it was. The big comics by EVS, Myers, Doug TenNapel, and the Comicsgate total now is probably almost $10 million, and there's hundreds of channels that are involved with this. It was a little community on YouTube. It wasn't hurting anyone. Nobody was forcing the SJWs to watch it, but they obsessively did watch it. And I went through his Fund My Comic, and I went through all the pages that he shows. It's awesome. I'm not just saying this because I like Cecil. I do, but I would not lie where your money is concerned. It looks fan-freaking-tastic. But they did watch all these channels, and then they'd go to Twitter and they'd whine about it because they had nothing better to do. The problem was mainstream comics were horrible, and nobody talked about them. But the SJW kids still considered themselves part of the comic community, but the thing they centered around was friggin' horrible. It was these woke, cringe comics, which most of the time they were going on, read comicsonline.2 or whatever. It keeps changing domains, and because there's a discus or something discussion section on there, and so these are all the and you can tell by their comics that they're SJWs. But keep in mind that's a Sailing the High Seas website, so they're not paying for the comics that they say they love. So they were happy to focus on a small group of plucky heroes who were rolling their own comics. And at one time, the left would be supporting these brave small businessmen and a couple of businesswomen in there as well. Mandy Summers has got a bunch of stuff out. But instead, they have a politically incorrect sense of humor, and the SJWs find themselves defending the billion-dollar comic industry instead of these small comic people and the $150 billion Disney that owns Marvel. It's weird to be old enough to watch the complete subversion and corruption of the left wing, from defending free speech and the little guy to censoring their perceived enemies. And it's like, we're not enemies. There is an enemy out there, but it's not your average middle class plumber driving a truck, or even your upper class attorney living in the suburbs. That's not the 1% left wing. To see the left wing marching through like an upper middle class neighborhood of Seattle, and this gay Asian guy comes out with his gay black husband, and he's looking at him, he's like flabbergasted. He's like, why on earth are you marching through the neighborhood that's already on your side. This is insane. Like, go through the gated community where the bankers live. And it's like, oddly enough, they never do. Anyway, so they go to censoring their perceived enemies and being on the side of every major corporation, media, and financial industry, and working with the FBI to imprison political protesters. I know I mention that all the time, but it really is that shocking to me. What Comicsgate did was allow professionals in the industry who were not getting hired because they're the wrong color or politics. It gave them a chance to have a second chance at making comics by going into business for themselves and selling the IPs that they own, which is even better, obviously. If you can get enough eyeballs on your project, and a lot of people have. The SJW kids would rather that people like EVS, Mike Miller, Doug TenNapel, John Malin not be allowed to express themselves because they have the wrong politics, because the wrong politics should not exist. So the SJWs are not buying the books, but they don't want anyone else to buy them. That's kind of the whole vibe of the left. They don't want them to exist because Iron Sights and Graveyard Shift are a threat to them somehow. It's a threat to our democracy. Comics about vampires. The new left wing is embarrassing. They're the participation trophy generation who never learned that you can disagree with people without being disagreeable, or that you might not get your way, that you might hold beliefs that turn out to be wrong, and it's okay to just kind of think about these things for a while. But they've been brainwashed their whole lives by globalist media to think that they're right and there are no other valid perspectives, to the point where Mark Waid got PMS so bad that he publicly announced that he was going to interfere in a contract between Myers and Antarctic Press. He very publicly announced that. It's like, yeah, it's like tortious interference with prospective business advantage. You can pull out your book of torts, and you can look up all those little things in there, kind of related to defamation, because globalists believe that they know what is best for you, and they don't. But Mark Waid's interference and being just such a colossal douchebag actually helped sell more comics, because people hate big nose busybodies like Waid, who would try to destroy a small artist and writer and businessman who's just trying to get a start in comics, like Myers. It's insane that nobody else on the left took him aside and says, hey, it's just kind of a weird look. You're a big comics writer. You've been in the scene for probably 30 years. This guy's a veteran who's of Marines and the Army, who's just trying to write comics. It's kind of weird. You see this, right? You're kind of crushing his dreams. It's like, yes, comics is a business. I get that. But it's a different kind of business. You know that as well. It's an artistic type of thing. But the left doesn't do that kind of stuff. Like somebody having a come to Jesus moment with Mark Waid, it just doesn't happen. So Comicsgate was a collection of first-timers and pros who were no longer welcome in the industry. I never imagined him having last name with Jones. I was expecting something with a little bit more spaghetti on it. So Comicsgate was a collection of first-timers and pros who were no longer welcome in the industry because they were on the right, or just vaguely milquetoast middle of the bell curve, politically speaking, which is all those guys are. Like, to me, they're not on the right. I'm on the right. Those guys are just kind of normal MAGA 2016 type of vibe. Though it is kind of interesting to see some of them progress to the right, like Malin and Cecil a little bit, which is just sweet to see, because it's gives us a sign of hope if you can take that middle ground and move them over to the right. And then you had people like Cecil with his natural comedic talent, who knew that he was going to be better than basically every single mainstream soy writer today. And if you're familiar with the mainstream garbage, you don't even need to know anything about Cecil to know that, yeah, that's probably going to be accurate. So Cecil writes, what were some of the worst examples of from like 2014, I don't know, to 2020? There's a fair amount of examples, but one of them is Al Ewing's 1 to 50, Immortal Hulk, which people think, which had cool art, no knock on the artist and whatnot, which people think was okay. They go, oh, I like that, and I point out, like, go back and look at issues 1 and 11. but this time put on the They Live glasses, and it's insufferable how bad the writing is. So Cecil writes Cash Grab 1, and it is a giant success, and I have it somewhere on the bookshelves that are double stacked. It's starting to look a little bit like hoarder syndrome, with the bookshelves. They just either get another bookshelf or start mailing your books out to people. But it was a fantastic comic, and I looked at Cash Grab, and I know that him and Doug TenNapel were arguing over something. I don't even remember what. Doug TenNapel's comics, I have those too. Fantastic, absolutely fantastic comics. And I looked at Cash Grab 2 on Fund My Comic, and it looks even better. A comic that should have easily hit $300,000 because it was funny and a little bit politically incorrect, which is, I don't know if I can show some of the images. Of course, the issue is that lampooning current events and having a sense of humor is not allowed, and the main platforms for this, Kickstarter and Indiegogo, don't allow anything that goes against the narrative and have banned several artists, including the marginalized and oppressed Cecil. And the thing is, everyone involved in Comicsgate knew that this was going to happen right from the beginning. It was always a weak point, a bottleneck in this. There's a few bottlenecks. The whole thing is kind of tenuous because you're selling on YouTube, and in it was like 2015. It's like 10 years ago when this whole thing started, at least on YouTube, and because it started before that on like the message boards when Myers was kind of getting his mind wrapped around this kind of stuff, and Captain Cummings and Angleton and whatnot. But at the time, pre-2016, pre-Trump derangement syndrome, YouTube was very firmly not a right-wing space, but it had a whole lot freer speech than it does now. And then Trump got elected, and Google decides to get in there and go, yeah, we're going to have to popular vote. We're going to have to put the kibosh on that. And they kicked off thousands of channels that they called far-right extremist channels. So before Trump got elected, they weren't far-right extremists. But after he got elected, now you just kicked them all off. That's weird. So did your terms of service change after Trump got elected? Like, you had the same toss before he got elected, and you had like Red Ice and Black Pilled and The Way of the World, or not Hunter Avalon, James Allison. There was hundreds of these really kind of fun channels, and like they didn't violate any rules, but they helped get Trump elected, so they had to go. Anyway, the thing is, there was a lot of weak points. One of them was YouTube, but the other was the platforms. So the solution, and to be fair, a lot of people did start spreading out to Odyssey, Rumble, and any other video hosting platform you can, because it's just so easy to upload your videos to a couple other platforms to spread your social media footprint out. But the places to sell the comics is going to be a bottleneck. So the solution should have been to use those platforms while they're available to you, but also team up, hire some tech guys, and build a free speech platform for the inevitability of being banned by the big two. The thing about the big two is that they offer discoverability. It means someone's going to be looking at that website for something else, and they'll stumble across your comic. And with Fund My Comic, you're bringing your audience with you, but of course, as the platform grows, that'll help improve a little bit. But starting an alt platform and an alternative movement, it has to start somewhere, and it's better to build it before you need it and start building that audience base as early as possible. Because Comicsgate, and the thing is, a lot of the bigger people in CG, they knew this was on the horizon, and it's kind of, a little mark on them that they didn't get this started right from the beginning, because a lot of those people did have some excess cash that they could have put into this. But, better late than never. Because Comicsgate is part of a new alternative community, which is mostly farther right groups that have been censored and debanked by these globalist lizard people and whatnot. And it's caused the creation of these alt video platforms and financial services to be created. And Comicsgate is not, it's part of it, like anything. And if you're, to the right of Mao, the left wing considers you far right. So you're lumped in with all these other sorts of groups, and Comicsgate is not, it's just right of center because it's pro free speech and against cancel culture and whatnot. So if you have the audience and Comicsgate obviously did, then people will build websites because they know there's something to cash in on. And people are realizing that these credit card companies, banks, and other companies are essentially the de facto government that runs the West. And if you expected your paid representatives to protect the little guy, well, prepare to be disappointed. They're too busy insider trading to Nancy Pelosi themselves into $200 million or sending your taxes to foreign countries so they can siphon some off. So it's up to the little guys to build a BitChute, Odyssey, GTV, Gab, all these other platforms, GiveSendGo, SubScribeStar, because we want free speech and the ability to buy and sell anything from entertaining comics to 3D printers to, hey, the founding fathers would be 3D printing, to whatever. It's weird, but there are these giant well-funded groups like GPAF, ADL, SPLC, ACLU, and others that are desperate to stop the flow of information. It's weird that they think they have the right. There's these, Soros-funded groups that are openly saying that they know what ideas the cattle are allowed to consider, which is a master-slave relationship, which is odd that they're doing it, and also kind of ironic that phrase for computer ribbon motherboard placement, they're trying to change that, or for automotive parts, brake cylinders and whatnot, because it's offensive to them. So it's a bit odd that the mainstream media doesn't speak out against it and support free speech. But they can't, because to support free speech now would just get you fired, debanked, deplatformed, and blacklisted. For free speech? What are you, some kind of extremist Hugo Boss? Like, isn't there a picture of you guys in Berkeley in the 60s marching with a sign for free speech? And then in the 2020, you're marching to stop free speech, literally in the same plaza. I took a summer school class over there. The thing is, to understand how subverted and corrupted the left has become, Sproul Plaza or something, become requires either being old enough or reading old books, and unfortunately people don't read anymore, which is actually very serious. I think it might be a civilization ending situation, and that only sounds crazy to young people because they don't read. Anyway, so the left is cheering on Cecil's cash grab part 2 not doing as well as the first one because the left supports these billion-dollar platforms and not the independent comic seller who wants to make a comic that people will love if they could get to see it. And I'm not kidding myself. I know this video is not going to be seen by a ton of people, and I know it's not going to result in any sales for this comic, even though it is. I mean, go to Find My Comic. Go read the preview pages for yourself. It will sell. If you go, you will probably buy it if you're a comic person, and that's how good it looks. But it's an important issue, and this is just one example. I could have used any other example of censorship, but this is in our community, so it's easy enough to use, and it legitimately does look fan-freaking-tastic. So what happens is it's a combination of mass reporting from these soy boy pussies and cat ladies, and the comic eventually gets taken down, and these left-wing commie kids never stop to think, are we the bad guys? So both Kickstarter and Indiegogo have Klaus Schwab-inspired DEI political commissars, and I say had because I'm not sure that they still have them. Some companies are slowly shrinking their woke departments a little bit as the social winds change and they get tired of losing money, and it's not as much. If you think there's hope in the corporate, no, abandon all hope, ye who enter here. They talk about Walmart. I think is doing something a little bit. I think mostly they're changing names and trying to. I don't think there's as much hope as you think. These people, for them, woke is a religion. So we'll kind of have to see with the next 2 months what happens there until Trump gets in office, and it's not that he's going to do anything. He's kind of a middle of the road guy, but what their reaction to him is. The thing is weird is it seems like Trump getting in office is the real acceleration as president when people thought it would be Kamala, because it's the left that are the accelerationists. So it's things are going in kind of an unusual direction. So what they amounted to were people paid to do comic outreach to usually gay non-white people, which Cecil, as an Italian, would probably qualify for. Cecil and JDA are Comicsgate's colored people of color, and to be fair, I think the blue-haired Asian woman at Indiegogo was fired. So, but it's just this woke stuff is really ingrained into basically everyone who works there. So what these both these platforms do is you go to the comic section, and remember Big Hawaiian Dick? I was just searching that on Kickstarter. And you know what? That actually looks fantastic. This is 10 years old, and it's $21,000 that he took, and he just put up his nose or drank, and it's 10 years overdue, of course. And if you're him and you've got a name in the comic industry, the thing to do is do anything you can over those 10 years and pay the money back and admit it was hey, mistakes happen, but you all got your money back. Let's start fresh. And people will start fresh with you because you refunded their money. You can't keep $21,000 because it's not that much money. You could be doing Uber, you could be mowing your neighbor's lawns. There's a lot you could do on top of your other stuff to pay that money back. But apparently he just kept it. And the people in the comment section, there's like 600 comments in here. They are absolutely hysterical because they're looking at that. It's like, yeah, you really should have paid that 21K back. Because, what does it say about you? That, like, are you just sitting around drinking beer or something? Like, what is B. Claymore doing these days? Anyway, so what happens is you go to the both of these platforms and you click on the comic section, and the first thing you're going to see are gay, trans, furry Nigerian comics that are going to do like $8,000 at most, and then the person is stuck shipping the comic out, and if they're lucky, they'll break even, because even when it comes down to it, the woke comics audience is pretty small. You can look at Joe Glass or Mags for the rest. So I'm not sure why the platforms feel the need to push these woke comics. Here's a novel concept for you. Why don't you just treat everyone equally and fairly? It's kind of a longer discussion. Because they don't want equal treatment. They want special treatment, so they spent the past decade or two creating this fiction that they're BLT and they're the new minorities and marginalized and oppressed and all this kind of Frankfurt School nonsense. They so badly want to be oppressed in the first world that they've created this Marxist hierarchical universe. But as I said in yesterday's video, it doesn't translate into sales. Mag's comics sit on comic book shelves and they get to issue 5 and they're selling 900 copies before they're canceled out of pity. These people can't compete on a level playing field, and their products, their comics, movies are such woke garbage that they have to censor what they feel are their competitors. Trump winning, I'm not sure if it's going to make these people better or worse, but I guess it's going to have to make them worse, because you never want to take the optimistic path where we're going now, because it's going to be wrong. The system's not going to fix itself. So I guess I should say yes. Under Trump, they're going to be even worse than they were. But because the corporate mainstream is mostly staying woke, and we have no choice but to create our own Hugo Boss safe spaces where we can be white supreme terrorists who want to sell funny comic books. But the left-wing narrative really is that silly. They look at these normal people in Comicsgate and they lose their mind over them selling comics. So because of this Indiegogo censorship, Cecil has lost probably $200,000. All because there is this accepted censorship of the right, or what is perceived of as the right. Because if you pointed out Cecil and said, "Oh, this guy's on the far right," I'm like, no, he's not. I am, but he's not. Which is anything politically incorrect to them, which means anything that goes against the globalist lizard agenda. I don't think I can show you the next image. But no, definitely not. But the bigger issue is what is downstream from this censorship, because people take in all sorts of communication from many sources, and humor, parody, and lampoon has long been protected vigorously because the fathers knew that in humor veritas. But when the right wing is broadly censored, not by the government, but by these lizard NGOs, and politics are downstream from all of these sorts of communications, including a comic book that is going to parody current affairs, it's reasonable to conclude that these globalist companies are affecting elections. It's weird that more people aren't concerned about we're slowly losing free speech because it's happening by billion-dollar companies and not by the government. but they have more power than the government. So it's like, well, de facto, de jure, I would have assumed that more people would understand the importance of the open marketplace of ideas. But again, it's that issue of people not reading anymore. What happens when the globalists have total control of the mainstream media, financial institutions, and universities? Oh, well, just look around. This current disaster that is called America, yeah, it's from the result of their complete and total control of the places that disseminate information and ideas. Universities, oh, you should, have free speech. No, as I just said a minute ago, they protest free speech with violence. Weird, weird, weird. And yeah, I'm saying that our representatives should be fighting for constitutional protections from these companies because the right of the individual to free speech outweighs the $1 billion company's freedom of association. And again, I'm surprised that more people aren't speaking up about these things. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. Of course, check out Cecil. I'm not trying to shill a comic for myself. Get one for yourself, and that will be good enough. Just go to Fund My Comic. It's on the front page. If you're a comic person and you go to the website and you read through his comic, I think the odds are fantastic that you're going to check one. It looked absolutely awesome. And I will see you guys all next episode.